So, continuing with another snippet from Paul Swanson, this is where he describes the threefold pattern of Chih-i's teaching in Tenchai Buddhism. He says, a threefold pattern, which can be simply stated as emptiness, conventionality, and the middle, is the key to Chih-i's analysis of Buddhist teaching and practice, and this pattern provides the basic structure for the analysis of various topics throughout the Moho Chih-kuan, which is the treatise that Swanson is translating in this particular book. This book called Clear Serenity, Quiet Insight. In terms of a threefold truth, first, all things are empty of a permanent, ongoing substance, being only the result of a provisional confluence of various causes and conditions. Nevertheless, this conventional reality of our interconnected existence is not nothing, but has temporary existence, and thus has provisional significance. To realize that our being is thus simultaneously empty of permanent existence, yet of conventional and temporary significance, is to realize the middle path of Buddhist wisdom. In terms of practice, we must remove, cut off, or deconstruct our various passionate afflictions, attachments, and mistaken views, and put an end to obstacles that prevent us from seeing or realizing things as they truly are. This is also expressed as entering emptiness from the conventional, that is, to realize that all things in the mundane world of our ordinary lives are empty of permanence, and to cease being attached to them through leading a moral life and taking part in practices that lead to a cessation of such passions and attachments. Next, one should be involved in the mundane world of conventional reality based on the wisdom of contemplation and compassion gained from realizing the emptiness of all things. This is also expressed as entering the conventional from emptiness, that is, to take on the bodhisattva-like activity of helping and saving others, while contemplating the world as it is in its dependent and temporary reality. These two aspects can be considered separate and as a step-by-step progression, but ideally they are two sides of one coin, and to practice them simultaneously is the middle path. Now, to get into a little snippet of his translation of the Moho Chih-kuan, I want to just recite this little excerpt that talks about how the bodhisattva actually is to implement this particular methodology or this particular practice. And in this, Chih-i, he's referencing the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. And again, this is Chih-i talking through the translation of Paul Swanson when he says, the Mahaparinirvana Sutra says, when a father and mother have a sick son, their attention is deeply inclined toward him. Buddhas and bodhisattvas enter the sea of samsara for the sake of saving beings, and they mobilize the immovable mountain of dharma nature, or dharmata, thus engaging in the practice of healing disease and the practice of a mother toward her child. This is called arousing the thought of enlightenment through the interaction of stimulus and response. A Dhyana Sutra says, the Buddha uses 4 appropriate methods in accordance with the capabilities of sentient beings to preach the Dharma, that is, in accordance with their desires, in accordance with what is appropriate, in accordance with therapeutic reasons for healing the diseases that need to be healed, and in accordance with the truth. First, carefully considering the predilections of his listeners, the Buddha preaches the Dharma accordingly and makes their hearts rejoice. Second, recognizing their previous worldly karmic habits, the Buddha makes it easy for them to take on practices. Third, perceiving the lightness or severity of their disease, the Buddha dispenses the appropriate dose of medicine. Fourth, when their capacity for the path has matured, they hear the preaching of the Dharma and immediately attain the path of awakening. Certainly, this preaching of the Dharma, according to the capabilities of sentient beings, is a benefit of the operation of stimulus and response. Well, very interesting. And this again points to the methodology of upaya, or skillful means, expedient means, the Buddha giving teachings in accordance with where people are at the time. I'll just share a little sidebar comment that has nothing to do with Buddhism per se, but it does have to do with meeting people where they are, and that being in the context of addiction or opioid addiction, which is now a major epidemic, so to speak, in the United States of America where I live. And in the interfaith group that I attend, there was recently talk within the board of directors meeting of us sort of hosting or co-sponsoring a harm reduction class. And what we became aware of is that there is an effort to provide such classes initiated through the North Carolina Council of Churches. And the point being that in the context of harm reduction, rather than condemning people who have addiction, the idea is to, again, to meet them where they are. And again, rather than, as I understand it, rather than demanding abstinence and forever becoming clean of the use of drugs, which may be unrealistic in many cases, the idea is how do you reduce harm? How do you meet people where they're at and provide methods and ideas as to how they can at least perhaps reduce their drug use, perhaps use drugs in a way that's safer in terms of all the potential negative sequelae of doing so. But again, I don't want to go too far in diverting from the Buddhist message here, but I think there's an analogy here where, particularly where Chih-i here is speaking of our diseases, so to speak. In other words, he's using the medical model and talking about the fact that the Bodhisattva and the Buddha, what they do is to meet people where they are, provide a teaching that people can relate to at that time, and over time, as they benefit and show further improvement, in the case of Buddhism, where they are less diluted, if you will, and less attached to the kinds of things that we associate with the poisons of lust and greed and also of anger and aversion, that then they can be perhaps prepared to go to another level, perhaps a deeper level of the teaching, just as the person who's addicted to a substance can perhaps then see that there is a path by which they can actually move toward a life free of addiction. So for what that's worth, as an analogy, I'll throw that out there. But in the meantime, again, I want to continue on with this Tianchai approach to Buddhism and share more snippets that may help the viewers of this channel, as well as myself as I review them, to gain a better understanding of the philosophy and practices of Chih-i and those who followed him in that Tianchai tradition. Namo Mita Boots. Namo Mita Boots. Namo Mita Boots.